Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that some stories and discussions in this episode of Radiant Resilience may touch on sensitive and potentially triggering topics. These may include themes of abusive relationships, violence and injury, gaslighting and manipulation, trauma and PTSD, self-esteem and self-worth issues, grief and loss, healing from trauma. Our goal is to share real-life experiences in a respectful and empathetic manner, offering insights into the complexities of the human spirit and the journey towards resilience. However, we understand that some content might be difficult for listeners. We encourage you to prioritize your well-being and discretion when deciding to listen. Please remember this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice or support. If you find yourself needing assistance, we urge you to seek help from qualified professionals or trusted support systems. Your mental and emotional health is important to us. Thank you for your courage and for joining us in a space of understanding and compassion. Welcome back, everyone, to Radiant Resilience. I have a very special guest today. Her name is Yara de la Torre. I should have clarified your name first. Perfect. Yara is an energetics and astrology coach. She empowers humans to align with their purpose and expand their life in a way that feels natural and unique to them. She uses the cosmos as a tool, per se, as a compass to help you find your own unique path to the legacy you are meant to live up to in this lifetime. I love that. With over 15 years of experience in the beauty industry, she's a salon owner, hairstylist, and mentor to a network of growing beauty professionals in her hometown of Key Largo, Florida. In 2019, her life changed in an instant after being a victim to an act of violence that left her paralyzed from the waist down. She now uses a wheelchair full-time as she continues to heal on all levels. It was through this journey of healing and discovering herself again in a physical, professional, mental, emotional, and spiritual level that she gathered what she teaches now. Proven methods and ways of living to help you transcend even the most difficult of obstacles. Sacred tools that support and guide you to your highest calling. A formula that becomes uniquely yours as you learn it. She uses the ancient art of astrology to help humans remember who they truly are, the authors and heroes of their very own success stories. Her purpose in her work is to guide you to become fearlessly authentic and use that as the key to unlocking your fullest and truest potential. That is quite the bio, Yara. Welcome, and thank you so much for doing this and coming to chat with us. Why don't you start from the beginning of your story?
Thank you so much for having me here, Tawny. And yeah, as you are reading my bio, I have always been wordy and I'm like making a note. I'm like, ask ChatGPT to summarize this a little bit. It is such a vast subject of what I bring to the table and what I bring to the world because of the unique life experience that I have had. And everything that has led me to being now in the place where, if you could summarize it all, I'm an astrologer who helps guide people spiritually. Somebody who helps you figure out how to heal and how to come back home to yourself using astrology, using tarot. But there is so much more to that, right? I am at 33 years old. There's so many pieces of my life that I could share with you, everything from the childhood experience that I had to being an immigrant. I moved here from Costa Rica when I was 13 years old without speaking the language, to taking on my career as a hairstylist at the age of 16 and growing in that field exponentially fast. And then social media and teaching and navigating dependency within my relationships, and then ending up in a relationship with somebody who had really bad intention, becoming a victim to somebody who was very abusive, repeatedly abusive, like a lifetime of crime. But, and then that being what led me to becoming paralyzed from an act of violence. So there is so many layers on this, and it's like, crap, what a bio. But even when I just meet people in person, their jaws usually just drop, and I'm like, and there's more. And like the cherry on top usually is, oh yeah, and I'm an astrologer. And they're like, I just can't. I can't. But I am happy to be here with all of who I am, as big of a personality and introduction as that takes. I think that my impact in this life and the medicine that I'm here to bring to this world is equally as big.
Yeah. Yeah. Kristen, who has done an episode on here. So if anybody's listened to that episode or has not, definitely go back and listen to it. But Kristen and Yara are friends, and Kristen speaks so highly of you. And I'm so excited to hear more about you and your story and what you do and all the things. And yeah, how was moving here from Costa Rica? I'm fascinated by that alone.
Yes. So that's how it feels. The story begins, right? Like that. It did happen at the age of 13. So I like to think of my like growing up as like life one and two because it felt very like separate culturally, with my language, of course, and then all the barriers that come with having that like cultural shock. It was pretty difficult. I came from a marriage, like a second marriage to both of my parents, and I was their only child, so I came 11 years after my sisters.
Oh, wow.
And so yeah, even that in itself, it had a lot of duality. I was like, I have siblings, but it felt like I was an only child. And then I moved here and it was very sudden, it was very unexpected. My parents knew that I was a very opinionated young teenager and that I probably wouldn't hop on an airplane if I knew that I was coming to stay. So that in
Oh.
itself is really, because I came to visit.
So they had told you that you were just going on vacation.
And that was my father's was Cuban American and grew up in America. So it wasn't uncommon for me to come here and visit, but it was during like what felt like an extended stay that my father had here, which I didn't know at the time because being the youngest, they kept everything from me. But he was like struggling with some issues, health, mental, and whatnot. He's a Vietnam veteran. So
Oh, wow.
he was being treated at the VA, and during that time, they decided to make some big life changes, like retiring and moving and seeking a slower life. And I was 13. Yeah, so that in itself was really shocking. But I think that all of these like challenges that I've encountered in life have a similar set of components. And usually it is like something very unexpected that happens. And then like you are given a choice, right? We are all given a choice to either sit in the misery or give up or take a self-victim attitude towards it or rise above it and learn. And
Yes.
that's been the theme. Even like when I came here from Costa Rica, I cried every single day for the first 3 months once I realized that I was here to stay. I didn't
Yeah.
have friends, and like that was obviously the time in life where you like I was just starting to get into boys and I had like good close friendships, and there was like drama in my neighborhood, and I was just snatched away from that and placed here. So after crying for 3 months, I made a really big decision and I said, okay, I moved to a predominantly, I live in South Florida, but my small island where I live is predominantly American people. So there was really just very little Hispanic influence or people who spoke Spanish. And in my 13-year-old mind, the cool kids were this whole group of individuals that were usually obviously American kids, people who spoke English.
Yeah.
And I was so hyper focused on popularity and like wanting to fit in or wanting to be accepted, wanting to be cool has been like something I always oddly wanted. And I am saying this because it is important in the rest of my story. The parts of us that are within us, even if it's something as little as I just want social status for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
do have something to do with our deepest inner desires and purpose. And
Mm,
even sometimes when they seem superficial like that, they often come together to help you become who you came here to be.
yeah.
And I use astrology to identify things like this. One day I realized, oh, my midheaven is in Leo, which literally means like I seek the spotlight for a reason. Like
Oh.
it's written in my birth chart.
Mm.
So I'll circle back to that later. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so in my journey of wanting to be accepted, I made a decision one day at the age of 13 and I came home and I told myself, if you want to learn English, you're going to have to immerse yourself into it. And I was like, whether I understand it or not, I'm not going to do any more Spanish. I am going to read in English, watch English TV, listen to English music, and put the closed captions on.
Okay.
And I've always had this way of being very determined once I figure out the solution to something and
Hmm.
following through. And I did. And within 6 months of being in my new school and in ESOL, which is English speaking for students of other languages, within 6 months of being there, they were like, you're ready to move on to regular classes. Like you've learned.
Okay. Wow.
So that was just one of the ways in which I've realized that when there's a problem, I have different options to tackle it. And
Yeah.
I find a solution, I get focused and get going.
So that's how you learned English in 6 months.
Somewhat. Yeah, I definitely I was out of the class that gave me a little bit of a comfort cushion, and then I was thrown into the wolves and it got progressively better very quickly.
Hi, friend, and welcome to this episode of Radiant Resilience. We are always looking for new guests on the podcast. I want to highlight you if you have a story of resilience that inspires others. Everyone has a story, and I believe that sharing yours can help others feel less alone. Are you ready to share your journey and inspire others? I want to hear from you. Every story has the power to impact lives and foster a supportive community. If you have a tale of overcoming adversity, personal growth, or a unique perspective on life's challenges, I would love to have you as a guest on the podcast. To become a guest, please email us directly at radientresiliencepodcast@gmail.com or click the link in the show notes to become a guest. Join us in spreading hope, strength, and inspiration one story at a time. Be brave and share your story so others feel less alone. I hope to see you soon. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the best ways to learn a language, definitely, is to immerse yourself in it fully as much as you can. I have been trying to learn Spanish for a very long time. I've gone down to Central and South America on vacations multiple times and taken lessons and stuff like that. It's still a very difficult language for me to understand, but I'm getting there.
Good for you, but yeah, full immersion. I think that's
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
it's interesting, that's with languages, but really fully immersing yourself into whatever
Mhm.
like you're being called to immerse yourself into, whether it feels like uncomfortable, like it would feel to be in a country and like where you don't speak the language. That is really how you get through stuff.
Yeah. 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 Being put in those uncomfortable positions in a lot of different aspects in life or how you grow. So you move here, you learned English. How were the rest of your teen years?
Again, similar themes. I got to the point where I was a little bit older. I was about 16 years old and I was very fully focused on like where I was going. My father wanted me to go into the medical field. I had good grades, naturally, always. And then I started having like interrelational like issues at school, like
Okay.
just with my peers. And I honestly was like bored and didn't feel I had received very good education in Costa Rica and not to throw shade at American education system, but like it deserves shade. Like it is
Yeah.
not the greatest.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I had learned any like particularly new material aside from American history from the moment that I had gotten here in seventh grade. And now it's my sophomore year. And I was like done. And I was done with the high school like drama and like the bickering and like, that sort of thing. And I was one day sick and my doctor's office, his wife offered me a job like during the
Oh,
summer.
wow.
Yeah. And something interesting about me is that I've never applied for a job and actually gotten hired. And I've also, now that I'm an employer myself, I've never put out an ad and hired someone. Every job that I've ever had has come to me, and every employee that I've ever had has just gravitated to me.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's interesting. I
It's one of
think,
those trust the universe situations, right? And it'll work out.
yeah, I think it's one of the ways in which the universe has shown me that we can manifest
Yeah.
by listening and by becoming clear in the route that we want to take, and then trusting that everything will align to
Mhm.
set us in that route.
Which is
Uh,
definitely easier said than done in a lot of cases.
but it takes a lot of practice.
Yeah.
And I think that by becoming aware of it, you learn to nurse yourself through the process of it, and it
Mm.
becomes easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So you start working at the doctor's office.
so yeah, and then I had the plan to, I was like, I can stay in high school 2 more years and then go to college and become a nurse, which seemed to be the plan. Or I can finish my sophomore year and get my GED and start taking classes at the community college and then move on to like real college. And just as we're recording this and I'm seeing your face and you're going, yeah, that's exactly what my father thought as well, which was really surprising to me because he was a big scholar and huge into school. But I guess I presented a fair enough argument that he was like, sure, like either you're gonna keep here, like sitting here bickering, going to teenage parties, blah, blah, or you can get on with your future. So he agreed. And I had that job at the doctor's office. I worked there that summer. I didn't want to seem like a dropout. So I finished my sophomore year. In the first week of summer, I got my GED, and then I started college that fall. And within that first semester of working at the doctor's office full time and starting to take whatever it was, anatomy and physiology or wherever you begin with, I
Yeah.
realized how tedious and boring this
Mm,
work was. It was no longer exciting. Like it happened very fast, like charting and like being behind a desk. And it was just not the energy that felt good to me.
okay.
Um, and I, in like my little 16-year-old mind, would like made this very hard decision to quit the doctor's office. And I was like, I'm still gonna be keep on going to school, but I just don't want to do this. And also my 16-year-old mind still living with my parents, not really needing to work, but I just was very determined. I wanted to find a new job. And I decided I do the office aspect of it, but I don't like it in this way.
Okay.
I didn't want to go back to restaurants. So I started searching around for a front desk receptionist, blah, blah, blah. And I remember that I went to school with a girl who I thought she was very quiet, very reserved, very demure, would say the internet right now.
That's
And
such a trendy word right now. So funny. We were talking about it at the salon yesterday, and everybody's using this word. What does it even actually mean?
I freaking love it. It means like shy, reserved, like polite, like
Okay.
feminine. So yeah, she was very much like that, not very outgoing. And I remember she had a job as a front desk at a very popular salon here next to our grocery store. So it was like high traffic. And I remember thinking like, how the hell did she get that job? Like I could have that job. And in my head, I was like, that is like top tier job. Like working at a salon as a receptionist must be the coolest freaking thing. Like this, like the year is like 2008. Like the fashion is you wear like that little like thin scarf. You guys remember that? Like that was like such a thing. And I don't know, gauchos were in, and like she
Oh,
got to
yeah.
dress like that. And like to me, for some reason, it was so important, like how you got to what you got to wear at your job. When I was a child, like a little like 6-year-old, I used to tell my mom that I wanted to be a banker because I would see the ladies wearing heels and pantyhose and like cute suits and go into the bank. So I was like, I want to be a bank teller.
I
Literally
feel
just
like that job would just not suit you at all, Yara.
definitely not. I do not like math. I cannot do like
You know,
no.
there was a time where that's what you wanted.
Solely because of the fashion. So
Okay, I love that.
like at 16 years old, I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, oh my God, working at a front desk. I was like, if this girl can do it, like I can do it. So I started like shifting my focus to trying to find like hotels, but also salons. And then I went to this career center where somebody helps you find a job, which I definitely did not need, but I was just so driven. And downstairs from where this career center was, where I had to go for a couple different like times, there was a salon. And I walked by that salon, and the first time I was like, let me go in and ask. And this stylist was there, and she was very fast. And I was like, oh, are you guys looking for help? And she was like, here's an application, bye. Like back when everybody just had paper applications and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And then I came back with the application and delivered it. And it was that same girl. And she was like, okay, bye. She probably stuck it in a drawer and just whatever. And then I had to go back to the office for something else. And I literally like was like, thought I was like, you're being annoying, Yara, but I just wanted this so bad. And I walked in front of that salon that had a two-way like mirror where you can see out, but you can't see in. So they probably saw me
Okay.
working back and forth. I walked back and forth 5 times before I was like, go in, just go in and ask. And finally I opened the door, and the owner, who was an absolute charmer, was available and ready to talk. And I was like, hey, I came in here and like I dropped off. And she immediately took me under her wing and was like, you're hired, like you're cute enough and you're hired to be here. She actually hired every single cute girl that asked for a job. So there was like 6 assistants.
Oh, wow.
But and then her goal was to like send every girl she could, every young girl that even had a slightest little bit of hair interest, to the new beauty school that was just outside of the island. That
Okay.
was like revolutionary because I live in a really small place, especially 20 years ago. We just didn't have anything like that. So everybody joined, everybody, all the girls joined. And I remember I was always like very different, right? I was like Spanish brown girl, and all the girls were like really thin and skinny and like cute and blonde and blue-eyed. And I just always felt less than.
Mm.
And it's so interesting because she didn't force us all, but she encourages all to follow it, to pursue it. And out of all the girls that I used to think I was less than, I'm the only one who actually made a career out of it. And, oh,
Interesting, because when I went to beauty school, I went while I was in high school, and I remember the teachers telling us like the first day, look around the room, probably less than 50% of you will actually go on to do this job. It's
oh,
fascinating to me how many people waste the time going to school and learning the skills, and then doing nothing with it.
yeah, I think it's just a big stigma around beauty school, like that it's gonna be easy or it's
Mm,
something that you can do for a little bit until you get like a real job. Whereas like I'm a mentor now, and like I'm on like girl number 4 that I've helped grow straight out of beauty school. And you either have it or you don't. Like
yeah.
the spark.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, it's funny. It's interesting. Yeah, so that's what happened. And then I hustle like we used to back in the day, because the year was 2010 whenever I graduated. So it took me quite literally 5 years to build a clientele, let alone like even become like somewhat of a good stylist. I think that naturally from the moment that I was in beauty school, I learned right away. I was like, this is my hidden talent. Like I always did a lot of things. Like my parents put me in everything. Being the youngest, I was like in like violin, I was in dance, I was in everything. Like they had the means for it, thankfully. And but I was always like mediocre at everything. Like I
Oh,
was never, like, which kind of stems back to those like self-love,
yeah.
self-esteem things. And then when I found hair, I was like, wow, this is really it.
I love
Um,
it.
but I think none of us were good back in. I think people who can like have been in the industry like 15 plus years, there was just no education out there. We were all just like trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And even I went to a tech school for beauty school. So it wasn't like the Aveda Institute or like the Redkin School or something like that. It was like a very basic, teach you enough to get by to pass your state board, which is only safety and sanitation, not even like how can you do hair?
No.
And then and then you're just thrown out there, and you have to. I did assist a woman, and she taught me for 9 months or something. But even after that, like it's a lot of trial and error at the beginning. And I would say for at least 5 years, if not more.
Well, even back then, I was fortunate enough to train under two women in the first 10 years of my career. One for 3 years who really gave me a solid foundation in cutting, and then one for almost 7 years who was an incredible real colorist. Like back then, like there was just not a lot of colorists.
Yeah.
Like my girl that taught me how to cut hair, she just played around with bottles, made shit happen. But so I was very fortunate for that. But even back then, like the way that you had, if you were a good stylist, it came from seniority. It came from the
Mhm.
years that
Yeah.
you had been in it, like doing the actual trial and error. And I can see why now, why then. But now I've seen we have so much access to education.
So
Children come out,
much.
they come out swinging. I love it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Cool. And eventually you opened your own salon then.
Not for a while. So much happened after that. I had a child when I was 21, which felt
Okay.
good because I was in a good, felt good from like a, can you actually be a mother? I had the resources, but I met her father very young. I was 20 and he was 10 years my senior. And it's like when life started to really settle in. Like we met and I had never really been loved or felt like I mean, I had boyfriends, but it was just never deep. I don't even know.
Yeah.
I think that it was a lot of like my own self-esteem issues, right? That I
Mhm.
couldn't even receive any kind of love.
Yeah.
Uh, so when I met this guy, he was like everything that I thought I wanted. And then he had his own set of issues. And then he really wanted to have a child bad. He was 10 years my senior, like I said. So he was ready to have a kid. And at first I was like, absolutely not. And then 3 months later, I was like, whatever you want. Which then crashed and burned really fast. It was like
Mhm.
we were together for the pregnancy, and by the time that the baby was like 6 months old, we were already breaking up.
Okay.
Uh, so it all happened like that, and it was really chaotic and very much I couldn't even see my own fault in it all. I felt very
Mhm.
much like a victim, and I was in certain ways, but he had some really not healthy behaviors. Like he never really stopped the lifestyle that he had before we had a kid. So then a series of events happened and he went away for a while. He was a runner. So I ended up just becoming a single mom, really. And
So
when
hard
she
at that age.
yeah, and when she was about 3 months old, he got into some big trouble,
Mhm.
and it looked like he was going to be away for a really long time. And that's when I really made the decision. I am going to just like well, I can't keep doing this to her, right? So I really significantly distanced myself completely and decided I'm going to do this alone. And then I did that. And in 2017, when my daughter was almost 5, I met the person that I would be with, which was like the pivotal turning point in my life. This came after I left my ex with her father. I dated, but I was always very cautious. I only ever had one boyfriend who really met my daughter, and then it was only one time. And then I started having, then when that went south, I started having like understandings about myself and maybe myself in relationships. And I realized that I had always had an attraction to women, but I
Okay.
had only ever been in a relationship with men.
Sure.
Uh,
I mean, that's
and
what
I,
society, especially at that time period, told us.
yeah, absolutely. And then
Mhm.
somebody from my past came back around during a time in which I was just raising my kid, and she was a girl, and we had a thing. And then we broke up. And then I was like, okay, I think I like girls because although we broke up and it was like it was done, there was not too much damage. There was not too much pain. There was
Okay.
no like crazy cheating or anything. And I was like, okay, I think I'm gay. Like,
Okay.
um, so then that was it for a while. And it felt safe for a
Okay.
long time. And then I met this person, this woman in 2017, and she was like very much the same kind of like my kid's father was. Like it was like everything I wanted, but in a girl. And she was now it was like the next level because I had told myself, I had given myself a series of must haves and will not tolerate. Must have a job, must have
Yeah.
bank account, will not tolerate a drug addiction. Like very
Yeah.
bottom of the barrel stuff. Like the bar was actually on the floor, but to me,
Oh.
it was an upgrade, right?
Hmm.
And this person, this woman, she seemed to have it like seemingly very figured out, and it moves so fast. And it's so important to note that as it was happening, it seemed so perfect. And at the time, I didn't know how to identify this. My entire body, my physical body was so in shock when I came around this individual that I would literally like shake like butterflies, but to the max.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and even like the first time we touched, it was like so intense that I was like, whoa, this is fucking crazy. Like this almost hurts from how
Oh,
intense.
wow.
And I thought that it was love. And like now that I know myself now, my body was like telling me to run. It was like
Oh,
screaming to me, this is not good. Like, which is crazy because I just didn't know what uneasiness felt, what anxiety felt, that my intuition was saying this is, my entire body would shake when I was near her. And I confused it as infatuation or love or
so
lust.
interesting. I think it takes us a really long time to figure out our own bodies, right? And especially in our 20s and stuff, I don't think we pay as good of attention to it. And part of that is awareness too. Like I feel as I've gone through life and I've wanted to go on my own healing journey, I definitely pay more attention to my body and reactions that I'm having to things. But I never paid attention to any of that when I was in my 20s, like especially early 20s and teens. And I would have been like, what are you talking about? What physical reaction or whatever? So I can imagine that you probably hadn't paid that close of attention prior to that and knew what that meant. So,
Absolutely not. Yeah, we have no idea. And like very much similarly, again, it's funny because I find like sometimes things repeat themselves in patterns so that we can then identify them and connect the dots. She was 10 years older than me as well. So now I'm 25 and she's 35, which doesn't sound all that bad. But now that I'm 33 years old, I can foresee myself in 2 years, but even now, I have zero in common with a 23-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And I could very easily influence a 23-year-old with my words, with my promises, with my whatever,
Yeah.
especially one who had self-esteem issues and didn't
Yeah.
love herself and had chaotic relationships. So the story goes on, and it was like stereotypical, like abusive relationship, like almost step by step. Like this individual worked hard to find out everything that ever hurt me, which felt, oh, she's trying to get to know me, but it was like a really adamant like curiosity around what is your biggest pain, what hurt you, like what was the most traumatic thing that you blah blah blah. And it's funny because she tried to use it as ammunition, and sometimes it worked, but I can now look back and see how all of that getting to know me was actually just trying to gather data, because sometimes she would try to hit me with something that she thinks would hurt me, but it wasn't actually triggering to me because like,
Okay.
and I was like, man, she literally was just collecting information to see what would stick and what would make me.
Mm,
So, but it didn't seem like that at first, of course. So I
yeah.
went through, yeah, like just very textbook narcissistic. And I use that word very carefully. I know that it is like a fad word right now online. I'm like, not everybody is a narcissist. And those who have been like in relationships like this, whether it's with a partner or with a parent or with a sibling, like, and I think that people can have egotistical tendencies. Sometimes we all can be
Yeah.
minded, but when you're dealing with a real narcissist, it's like scary shit. It
Mm,
feels like your life is not yours, like your reality is not real. And even the physical influence that it has on you, on your cortisol levels, on
mm,
your chemicals in your brains, it causes things like memory loss and like confusion. And it's really something.
yeah.
So that's what happened. I slowly started to lose myself because
Mm,
this was just perfect, a perfect combination of somebody who had very little self-esteem and didn't know herself, and someone who is looking out to gain blank, whatever it may be, from others
Wow.
at whatever cost.
Ugh, oh
Mhm.
goodness. So how long were you in that relationship?
So it is broken up also in two sections.
Okay.
2 years prior to my injury, which she was the person who injured me, and
Mm.
2 years after that as well, which is
Oh, okay.
really crazy.
Hmm.
And the beginning of my biggest spiritual awakening, I would say. I would say that I've had a series of awakenings beginning when I was young, but the most recent and the one that, so when I met this person, I started to slowly leave behind and abandon parts of myself very slowly in order to appease to them. And it started with, oh, I want to spend more time with you. Do you have to go to the gym every morning? And then I would like cut it down to 3 times and then 2 times. And then I quit the gym. And
Mm.
that in itself lets the other person, the abuser, know, okay, this victim is willing to go this far. And then they push. And then it went on to criticizing pretty much every relationship around me, my best friend, my family, my boss, anybody who was of a support system to me, they needed to eliminate.
They try to isolate.
And the first one, it started with my best friend. She like completely somehow had a way of turning me against him. And he
Mm.
had been through a lot. He's been my best friend since we were 14, still is. But he had been through a lot of with me and my ex-husband, and he just didn't want to get involved in my relationships anymore, basically. And
Mm.
when this came about, he was just like, okay, I'm out. So that was really easy. So that was like my number one like source of support. And then from there, it ended up to where I was rushing from the salon back home so much to her because she just, again, it started with, oh, I miss you. Oh, come home, to like, where are you? Why are you not here? You finish your client at 3, it's 3:15. Like, where are you?
Oh,
Crazy.
wow.
And still under the disguise of, I'll be like, oh, I feel overwhelmed, blah, blah. And she's, oh no, I just miss you. You don't have to rush. I'm not telling you to rush. I'm just asking.
Mm.
So I ended up getting fired
Oh,
at my
shoot.
7-year job, like where I was like a top producer. And I was very upset at the time with my boss, but now looking back, I see that she was one of the few people who actually tried to stop it. Like she thought that, okay, if I fire this girl, she's gonna wake up and
Okay.
she would see that this is not good. And she told me, she had a lot of conversations with me because even from the beginning of my relationship with this person, we were already having arguments. It was already chaotic. There was
Mm.
already, she tried to save me, but instead it worked as fuel for me to like,
Oh,
for me to really go full throttle into my career. And it was also during this time that the person that I was with realized the potential that I had to generate income and to make money. Because I was a victim to abuse that was mental, that was psychological, that was emotional, physical, and financial. Literally, looking back now, I'm just like, girl, get real. I cannot believe you let this happen to yourself.
mm.
But it happened slowly.
Okay.
And the fact that it happened in so many layers helps me now be able to help people in various forms of abuse.
Okay.
To another salon, like I said, I was a very sought after, very popular stylist with a full book. Every salon was like, yes, we'll take you.
Yeah.
Um, it was crazy that I was no longer at the other place. But so I went to another salon, worked there for 8 months. And within those 8 months, my own life started changing drastically. This is also where my Saturn return happened at age 27. So if you or the listeners may have heard of the term your Saturn return, it happens between the ages of 27 to 30. So
Okay.
that entire chunk of time. And this is the time in which Saturn, the planet of karma, hard lessons, discipline, time, comes back around to the same place it was at the time of your birth. Saturn
Okay.
is a slower movement planet, so it takes about 27 years for it to return back to the same sign.
Okay.
And when that happens, Saturn is also like the father of the zodiac. And Fathers teach us with like tough love, right? Like guidance. Hey, put things in place, boundaries. So during the ages, mine and everybody else's, during ages 27 to 30, there will be a massive change that we undergo. In astrology, we really consider this to be the time in which we actually become adults.
Okay.
Mhm. And things like changing of jobs, careers, buying a house, moving, ending big relationships, big injuries could happen. Like things that are going to drastically impact and change the trajectory of your life. And in it, there will be lessons that will guide you to the wisdom and the understandings that you need in order to become who you came here to be.
Super interesting.
Yeah. So during that time, I opened my salon in 2018. I became selected by what I consider a big hair company at the time to become one of their educators. They flew me to Atlanta and trained me for 3 days, and I was doing balayage, and I was the only like actual French hair painting, which is still what I specialize in. And nobody else was doing it at the time. And I just grew potentially in popularity down here and online, and everything was like seemingly perfect from the outside. My partner, but not really we because it was her, bought a house. It was a 3-story house, and it had 3 different components, right? The bottom was 1 floor and one like entire apartment. The middle was more of the house. That's where we live. And then the top was a little shack, like a small, like little studio. And I paid for half the mortgage, but my name wasn't on it. Or that's when the like financial thing started. I started
Okay.
like really putting out a lot more, but it was just all for her gain. But I was fine because she also reminded me that if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have this, I wouldn't have that, I wouldn't. When in reality, I did all the work. So I opened my salon and that started going well. That was 2018. I became an educator. February, I went to Atlanta, and it was interesting because my joy always bothered her. Although I was doing good things, like even with this opportunity to become an educator, her questions were like, what does it mean? How much money is it going to make you? When do you start making money? And I was like, trying to explain to her that like meeting this person who was behind the company in itself was like a huge deal to me.
Yeah.
The exposure, the connections, like the experience in itself is the gain, and the money will come later. But she always wanted to rain on my parade. I was never allowed to be happy, not too happy.
Yeah.
So then that year of 2018 in December, I had a friend who got married, and I was part of the wedding. And again, that in itself, like the bachelorette party, I wasn't allowed to have fun. I actually ended up leaving early. There was just so much control. On the day of my friend's wedding, she had been violent with me many times before, and she always blamed it on me. But this was one of the nights in which like the abuse really went over the top over really nothing. And there would be this switch that would happen when she drank,
Mm,
that if something wasn't up to her standards or to her liking, I would feel all of the wrath of it. And it had happened so many times before, and I would always just submit and be quiet and be small and try not to aggravate the situation.
yeah.
This night, she got upset over me suggesting that we leave we had the kids, they were 4 and 6. She had a kid, I had a kid. The jacuzzi was right in front of our room. She wanted to go very badly. She was very upset that we didn't get to go because I was at the reception celebrating the wedding.
Yeah, sure. It's your friend's wedding.
But when we got back to the hotel room, I was like, why don't we like use the phones as monitors? Like I'll call your phone, my phone, and we can go in the jacuzzi, which is right. Oh, so the hotel, there was nobody there. My friend had rented it just for the event.
Okay.
And my partner thought that this was just such an outrageous and careless suggestion, and that I was such a bad mother, because that was the narrative, that I was a bad mom, always.
Mm.
That she decided to get really violent with me, and she beat my face with a phone with the phone at the hotel, ripped my entire bridesmaid dress. It was an entire thing. I was literally begging her to stop.
Oh my gosh.
So I ended things. We left early that morning as fast as I could. We didn't make it to the brunch, all that. And then I just proceeded to cover my face with makeup for the entire next 2 weeks
Mm.
and not talk to anybody about it and wear glasses and wear my hair down at the salon.
Mm.
And I was training 2 young girls out of beauty school at this time. So they were young. They would not ask their boss, hey, is something wrong? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
they knew something was up. Everybody knew something was up. But anywho, that was in December of 2018. And on April of 2019, just 5 months later, would be the night of my injury, in which she again lost her cool with me
Mm.
and kept my phone from me and locked me out of the house. And when she locked me out of the house, we went into this whole. I finally tried to stand up for myself, and that never really went on well. And she ended up pushing me off the second story, and I ended up falling off, landing on my back, and becoming paralyzed
Oh
immediately.
my gosh.
Um, to further do damage, some of you may not know this, I should probably always mention it. If somebody ever falls or is in any kind of injury, and they're laying down, do not move them ever. She ran downstairs and told me that I was faking it and to get up, and proceeded to pick me up by the arms repeatedly over and over again until she finally realized that I was not joking and that I was actually paralyzed. So then, or I don't know, if something was really wrong, I didn't know I was paralyzed. I just felt like my entire body was pressed down on the ground and I couldn't move anything but just my neck. And then I checked on my hands because I just thought that was so important. And I remember like looking over at my left hand and being able to move them, and that just brought me so much comfort
Mm.
because I still had my hands. And then I was airlifted to Miami and placed in ICU. She didn't come.
Mm.
They called my parents and my father, who was like his world. That was his world. He came and I didn't say much. I protected her from the moment that this happened. Even as they called the ambulance and they came to pick me up, she was hovering over me and she was saying, what are you going to tell them? What are you going to say? And I said, don't
Still
worry.
just super concerned about herself in that moment.
And I said, don't worry. I'll just tell them that I was locked out and I fell.
Oh my gosh, Yara.
And that was the story. And then I had cops come and talk to me, and doctors, and my father, and everybody asked me over and over again, did anybody have anything to do with this? And I just said, nope, no, and no, and no, and no, and no, and no.
Did all of your friends and family know that she
I
was,
had no friends and family.
oh,
I had
she had
no
separated you?
Everybody just thought everything was perfect. All I did was post happy pictures online and try to reassure the world of how extremely happy I was.
Mm.
And I was successful and my career was going well. And I was the perfect victim.
Mm.
And in my insanity and like my Stockholm syndrome, I thought that if we got through, I didn't think it, she told me, I love you, you're the love of my life, we're gonna get through this together. And it brought me some sort of comfort. And I said, maybe this is the thing that will finally show her how much I love her and it'll finally bring us together the
Mm.
way that I always wanted, because that's all I wanted. I just wanted her validation, her acceptance, her love. That's all I ever wanted in general, right? That's all so many of us ever want. But
Yes.
we feel like we don't get it we do everything and anything in order to try to gain it.
Mhm.
And the paradox there is that is just your soul begging for you to give that love to yourself. But at least for me, it took me literally losing my ability to walk and even further after that, 2 more years of continued abuse.
Mm.
God and the universe and all of the stars lining up together for me to finally one day, in the most unique and divine and unexpected way, to finally wake up and realize you are living life with an actual evil human. And even our stay for the next 2 years was all a very strategic plan for her not to get in trouble, because it wasn't the first time that she had hurt somebody badly physically, and it wasn't the first time that she had a situation in which she knew what a statute of limitations was, and she was intentionally dragging it out for that time to be. And I found out, oh my God, this story is so crazy. By the time that I finally unraveled all of this, we had been finally over for 6 months. One day I put my foot down. She had said a horrible thing to my daughter, and finally that's what woke me. It wasn't the first time. We both had been abused for a very long time, but it was a big trigger for me, and I finally had it. She said something ugly to my daughter, and I was like, get out. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. But it wasn't for 6 months after that, because I didn't tell anybody that we had broken up. I was so scared to live my life as a paralyzed, disabled woman now. The time in between this is crazy too, because I returned back to work after 5 months. I bought my own house, and then I proceeded to let her live in my house rent free. I was paying the entire mortgage
Oh, wow.
for a year and a half. And it wasn't until that moment that we finally broke up. Now I'm in my home. I'm living all alone. I couldn't tell anybody. I didn't even know what to tell anybody. Everybody still believes Yara's amazing and she's overcome this and her partner has helped her so much. I'm talking everybody like on the internet in town and the story. I've had podcast interviews with people who've been like, what happened? And it was really funny because every time somebody asked me on camera or on a podcast or in a written interview, they were like, I would be like, oh, I locked myself out of the house and I took a step back. Whoops. Okay, moving on. And it's, oh, that's interesting because Yara's always so full of words.
Mhm.
But when you ask her about the single most traumatic night of her life, she just has 2 sentences and she wants to move on.
Wow.
So it was 6 months after finally figuring out that I was with an ugly person that I started to unravel everything. And I had a meeting with an old friend who finally was the one who said to me, I found it really interesting because one time I was having lunch with her and her baby had just been born, and she was speaking of how much she wanted to get out of a relationship with you, that she was just over it, blah, blah. And the friend said, why don't you? Why don't you just let Yara be and like be happy or be alone? And my partner replied, oh, I am. I'm just waiting until the statute of limitations is up so that she can't pin this on me.
Oh, wow.
So this is 6 months after we had broken up. So I'm like, I already knew she was a bad person. I already had figured out a lot of things that were wrong because I had been working with a codependency coach, because in a very divine way I found her. But I didn't realize how deep and how evil all of this went.
Mm.
So when that happened, I decided, this was April 2021, I believe. No, April 2022.
Okay.
And I called a lawyer friend of mine who I had been just coincidentally doing other passport related stuff with. And I, at this moment, had never told anybody about what had really happened besides my codependency coach who lived in the UK.
Okay.
Right. And I called my friend who's a lawyer and I told her, I have a question and I don't know if this is up your alley, but I need to ask somebody. And I told her, my ex, blah, blah, blah. I was like, she's the one who caused this. And my friend was like, what the fuck, Yara? And Oh man, it was one of the craziest like moments of release. Like telling that out loud for the first time was so filled with emotion and
Oh,
tears. I
yeah.
had been holding it back for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And she looked up the statute of limitations and she goes, "You're good. You have 3 years," is what she said.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay. She's so basically, because my injury happened in April, she said, "You have an entire year." And I was like, okay, no big deal. I'm gonna sit with it. And I sat with it. And one day I just went over to the courthouse and spoke to them and filed a report. And it was April 20th, and my injury happened April 28th. And over the next few days, the detectives would come call me and get more details. And then they came to my house on April 27th and got my official testimony. And they were very nice. And then they ended with, okay, we need to ask you one last question. It's very important. Do you want to move forward and press charges with this? And we need to know because time is of the essence, because time is against us. And I said, why? And he said, because the statute of limitations for criminal court cases, not civil, which is money. Civil's money, criminal is how you incriminate somebody who committed a crime, is 2 years.
Oh,
And we have one day to file this.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
What was going through your head right then?
Wow, I just understood very clearly that this was something that I needed to do
Mm.
and that it had happened in divine timing. And I said, absolutely, let's go for it. And then an investigation went on for 4 months, and I was working with a really dear, beautiful, incredible coach of mine who's now my dear friend Elizabeth Fay. And I was in the middle of a one-on-one container with her. And I had a meeting with her the day that I met with just coincidentally, we booked these meetings months in advance. That same day, and I came into her session crying, and I said, I have nothing to talk about with business, but I have some really heavy, deep shit to tell you about. And
Mm.
she held space for me. And what she told me was, this is a journey that is for you, and I want you to not have any attachments to any specific outcome. Meaning whether they find something or you're able to go to court or not, this is not, do not attach yourself to an outcome. And that was the best advice I could have ever received, because the next 4 months of investigation would just be a journey of reclaiming my voice and my sovereignty and starting to speak up. And this was a very slow process that I had to do with people who were closest to me. And I began being able to tell the story. And every time it was so filled with emotion, like for me to be able to tell it to you right now without breaking down the entire time, it just took so much. And every person, my team, my best friend, my sister, my peers, my friends, and then all the way down to my daughter. My daughter was the last person, because eventually it got out enough to where I knew that she was little and went to school. And she herself, in her own little beautiful mind of coping, because I told her, oh, it was just an accident. She always asked. And that she would ask me, like, Mom, are you sure? And I said, yeah, baby, I just fell. And then with her own cute little mind, she would make jokes about it with her friends. My mom was doing parkour in a building and she fell.
Oh,
I know. So telling her was like the biggest part, the biggest chunk of having to come clean about this. And we worked through that. And my daughter too has been through a lot of beautiful, incredible therapy and healing of her own. We've grown together so much. And then there was an entire, yeah, just that. And then 4 months later, I got a call from detectives, and it basically was they couldn't find much. It would make no sense to go against this in court. It would probably fail, and it would probably backfire on me, honestly, because there was,
really?
yeah. So because had no attachment to the outcome, didn't feel destroyed. I didn't feel good, but it did not wreck me. I realized in that moment that those 4 months were a journey of me refining my voice and my sovereignty and speaking the truth of what actually happened. And it was so freeing. And then from there on, I used TikTok as a coping mechanism. I would make a lot of videos about codependency, about narcissists, about my experience, and I help people since. And I had the local newspaper wrote an article on my story and published it.
Oh, wow.
I made a coming out video basically that I posted not just on my Instagram, but also on my Facebook. So that the community that I live in knew, and everybody just knows about it now. People have their opinions on whatever it is. She is also a business owner. So for a long time, she went into hiding. She's a narcissist and she still pops up and she still likes to keeps beautiful, like crazy tabs on me all the time because
Even still.
oh my God, yeah. Like her biggest obsession. I wouldn't be surprised if she was listening to this right now.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man. Oh,
But I
so
feel safe. So
you
that
what?
I am safe.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, she's not trying to come find you or anything like that.
Well, narcissists are funny. They're all different types, but you take your power back the second that you're no longer. And I remember seeing when we first broke up, she's tried to linger around and to keep me like as one of her like shelf things, people that she keeps whenever she needs. And I remember looking at her straight in the eyes and just being like, you don't have power over me anymore. Like,
Mhm.
I know who you are. And she was like, oh, we should just be friends. And I was like, for what? I was like, so we can be friends and you can get whatever it is that you want out of me. And the second that you have another victim, you dispose me. And it was like she knew, she was like, oh, this is not fun anymore.
Do you know much about if she's had relationships since or if any of that's still going on?
Yeah, I've heard it's a small town, so I've heard through the grapevine, and the behavior's still the same, still hurting people, still drinking and causing chaos, still being physical. It's just a matter of time. I have a friend who was paralyzed by her ex-boyfriend, and he shot her, and he had a father who had money. And he got out scot-free. And 10 years later, just last year, he is now in jail for attempted murder. He tried to kill one of his friends with a knife. So things come around, and it is not up to me. I'm at peace. I know why this happened. I understand. Through the healing that I've done, through therapy, through all of this discovery, through connecting deeper with my intuition, and then through that, finding my natural gifts and my affinity
Mhm.
to astrology. Astrology was there was a breaking point for me back in 2021 where I was studying astrology just because it enticed me. Like I've always been interested in it, but I started finding more about it. And then I decided, I was like, let me go back to that date, April 28th, 2019. And it was like one of those moments where you've seen that meme with the girl with all the math formulas and like numbers around and everything just like connects and it clicks.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, Mars was in Gemini, and that is in my seventh house of relationships, and it was square, and everything else was in Mars, which signified aggression and like discomfort. And like the reason why I even got hurt is because I finally used my voice. And it all added up, and I was just like, astrology is real. Not that astrology always is, whether you believe it's real or not, but it just clicked in my brain in a way that I couldn't. And from there on out, I've used it to help guide me in the different cycles and waves of life. And now I help other people with that too.
That's amazing. So tell me a little bit about the astrological healing and stuff. We've touched on it a little bit, but if somebody's coming to you for services, what does that look like?
Yeah, I love that. So I'm currently working actually in a three-tier program that I'm going to be offering, but essentially I use astrology as a form of self-discovery, self-actualization, and self-healing, which leads to evolution, right? So there are two different ways in which we can use astrology. There's endless ways, but two ways in which I use it and I help people use it. One is by discovering your own natural makeup and blueprint, like your innermost stellar makeup. So this is going to be based off of your birth chart, which your birth chart is essentially like a screenshot of the sky at the time of your birth, right?
Okay.
So we have the 10 different celestial bodies that we look at, like the moon, the sun, Mercury, Venus. Each one of those planets represent a different like aspect of life, like how you shine, how you speak, how you work, how you show up in relationships, how you show up in your community. And depending on which planet falls on which sign, which is like the 12 zodiac signs, we have a formula to dictate, okay, this is how Tawny likes to show up in her fullest expression. This is how Tawny thinks. This is how she loves, and how she likes to be loved. This is how she's going to show up in her career. This is how she shines more in her purpose. And then we get deeper, right? This is her biggest wound. And we can like get deeper and deeper into that in astrology. So we use that to get to know ourselves and understand ourselves more. It's very similar to human design or the Enneagram system, right? Like almost like a personality test, but even more unique and custom. And like we can just dive deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
So that's one chunk, and that is anybody can get that with me. It would be a birth chart reading. I do them by the hour. They're $111. It's almost like a no-brainer. Wouldn't you
Yeah.
know yourself
I
deeper?
think
And
I'm ready to sign up. I think
yeah,
that
yeah,
I've
and
never had
everybody,
anybody do that for me. I think that would be so interesting.
oh my God, it's so cool. And what I really love about doing a birth chart reading with people is that we get to know the parts of you that are naturally you.
Mhm.
And it helps us with that self-discovery and self-actualization. So what does that mean? Like I was saying at the top of our call, I've always wanted to be in the spotlight, right? And that used to be something that I had a lot of shame around. I was
Mm.
like, why am I like this? And like I've been made fun of it for it. As far as like social media goes, like MySpace, Facebook, like any kind of social media since the beginning of times, like since I could get on the internet and be in the spotlight, I always wanted it. Like I wanted to be like Jeffree Star, like MySpace famous. And like you think, oh yeah, everybody wants that. It's like maybe, but really, like to the point where it's like I really want it. Like I don't know why. I just like it. I just want to take pictures and look pretty. And again, people have been like, that's stupid, or why do you do that? Or like partners have criticized it and be like, why do you care so much about that stuff? And I was
Mm.
always like, I don't know. But then when I started using astrology, I learned that my midheaven, which is how I shine and like how I show up in the public eye, it is also the legacy or like thing that I am meant to leave behind is in the sign of Leo. And Leo is all about leading by expressing yourself, by
Mm.
being in the spotlight. So that energy is still uncomfortable for me, but I know now that it is a crucial part of my makeup and it is actually how I am seen more. So I'm able to tune out some of that self-critical or imposed, like societally imposed limitations on me
Yeah.
or self-imposed limitations and just do it. Another one that I've seen is sometimes people are highly critical of like how perfectionist they are or like how they think around things. Okay, tell me where your Virgo is in your birth chart and like we can maybe dig into like why that is. And like maybe it's not something that you need to be ashamed of, but learn how to use.
Yeah. I love that. I think that the more we understand about ourselves and where we came from, and even things from our childhood and stuff, it's a great way for us to learn how to heal ourselves and move forward and accept things and understand things better for sure. So I think that's super interesting.
Yeah. And then once you know that, then you can take that a little further. And a huge part of my work is also working with entrepreneurs or people who are in this journey of just evolving. So then we can apply astrology to your work, to your wounding, to navigate different things. But that is definitely something that I would, once you're in my world, you can learn more about. A really good way of just getting started is just by following me on social media.
Mhm.
And then I also do have a community that's called the Moon Portal, in which I go live monthly and I do 2 different workshops surrounding the full moon, the new moon, and I teach you how to work with the current energy. So it's really fun. It's a way to attune yourself to the natural cycles of life and a remembrance of the fact that we are one with nature and the world and the cosmos around us and not
Yeah.
separate from it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you for explaining all that for those who I'm not. I look at I'm a Pisces and here's your, I don't know, horoscope for the day. That's about as far as I've gone into astrology.
Yes, I am hoping everything's a journey, and I am actually right now in the like 2 years in of doing astrology work, working one-on-one, holding spaces, being in communities, being guests in communities. I am just now getting to the point where I'm like, oh, okay, I know what I want to share with the world. And I think that once I have these offers put together, I think it's going to be a really cool way for people to be able to understand and use astrology more easily and in a much less intimidating way, because it is a broad subject and it can feel like what you just said. You're like, I'm a Pisces, and what else? I'm like,
Yeah.
so I'm excited to be bringing this. I think it'll help a lot of people.
Yeah, that's amazing. So after sharing that crazy story, I don't even know what crazy, like wild ride, which thank you for being vulnerable and sharing all of that. And I'm so sorry that you went through all of that. What helped you the most get through that healing after that?
Being in it, fully
Mm.
immersing myself in it. One of the big things that I teach and that I focus on is grief. The process of grief is something that we're all going to have to experience. It is something that really helped me back in 2019 when I became paralyzed and I learned that grief is not just losing someone, but it can be losing something like a job or a lover or a body limb, like a part of your body, or
Yeah.
even any other kind of health situation where life changes and you lose a version of who you were.
Mm.
And being really aware of the 7 stages of grief and creating the time and space to fully immerse yourself into each one of those. And it goes everything from denial to bargaining to anger to depression to finally coming to accepting what is the only way through. It's like through is the only way through. And um trying not to rush and holding space for myself and having a lot of gratitude for everything that is and that got me here, even the parts that weren't so pretty, but being able to hold space for each one of those and see the rewards of it. It's just that's the formula. That's really the
Oh.
formula to life.
But it's so hard, right? And when you're in the midst of a lot of that stuff and those emotions, it can feel like it's drowning you. But your advice is to just keep pushing through.
I think finding the tools that work. For me, it's astrology. What can bring you to the present moment, right? For me, even now, I still go through challenging times. I am in a beautiful, healthy relationship, the only and healthiest relationship that I've been in my life. And still things come up, right? And it's like how we navigate them. So to me, it brings me comfort to be like, oh, we're struggling a little bit right now. What's going on with the stars? What's
Mm.
going How can I put my birth chart and his birth chart together and see what's happening right now, what we're navigating? Finding tools that help. For me, it's astrology, and that's what I teach. But I don't only use astrology. I have spaces in which I go to for help too, with breath work, with EFT, with journaling. So finding tools that can help you through those moments of difficulty. Find what resonates with you. For me, it's the stars, but for somebody else, it may be art or dancing or whatever.
Yeah, I love that. And how are you with being paralyzed now? Because I'm sure that was a journey in itself to heal from mentally, emotionally, not just physically.
Yeah, I realized very early on, like in the first 6 months of my injury, I saw something or someone. I can't remember exactly what it was now, but I remember, wow, if I would have seen that with my old eyes, I would have thought differently. And I said, wow, I have new eyes.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it helped me learn to love myself in a way that I was never able to when I walked.
Oh,
And it
wow.
doesn't mean that I love every part or every day, but I do feel gratitude in everything. So I think that helps so much. Again, I'm just present in my life and I don't even struggle that much anymore with it, really, because I love myself so deeply.
That's so important. I admire you so much for being able to get to that place because some people may never be able to get to that place. I think I'm so grateful for you for sharing this story and being fully vulnerable and everything. I do not take it lightly. Do you have any parting words for those listening?
Thank you so much, Tawny. I think this is beautiful. I think what you're doing is beautiful. Thank you for creating a space for all of us to be vulnerable and to put our guard down and connect. I think that as we move into the age of Aquarius, the old systems are collapsing and the new systems are coming together. And Aquarius is all about community and sharing and leaving behind the hierarchy. And I
Mhm.
think that particularly women, we just need to sit with women. We just need to
Mhm.
sit in spaces where we are heard. And there's no guru and there's no, like, again, hierarchy to anything. We just are. So I love that. And thank you for being a part of that.
Thank you. It's been really important to me to share. I just don't want anyone to feel alone in what they're going through because it is a deep, dark place. If I can just share people's stories who are willing to share, because I also know that's a hard thing to do for some. You were in the beginning not one that wanted to share it, but maybe somebody will listen and find some comfort in that there is a light at the end of the tunnel eventually, and you can get there, and you're not alone, and there are others out there that can help. So, because community is so huge, I think.
Yeah, it's everything.
Yeah. All
Each other.
right. What's that?
We need each other.
Yes, we do. We do. And with the age of the internet and social media, we're getting more and more alone and isolated in general, even though we're like online all the time. It's not the same as a direct human connection. Anyways, yeah. Do you have anything else, or is that you do feel good?
Hello. Yeah. And if anybody would like to chat with me or connect with me more, just follow me on social media. I'm sure you'll put the links.
Yeah, I'm going to link your social media in the show notes. Thank you so much, Yara, for coming on here and sharing that story. You are such an inspiration and I admire you and you're an incredible soul. And I can't wait to get to know you a little bit more. Hopefully maybe I'll have you do a birth chart for me because I think that sounds super fun. All right. Thank you everyone for listening and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and found value in the stories shared, please consider following us on your preferred podcast platform. Your ratings and reviews make a huge difference. They help us reach more listeners and continue bringing you engaging, insightful content. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Until next time, keep listening, growing, and sharing.